If you've been laid off recently, there's probably nothing more that you want than to get back on your feet as quickly as possible and show that company that just laid you off that they made a huge mistake. So how do you bounce back stronger than ever after a layoff? Stick around and I will tell you how. Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to share with you how to bounce back stronger than ever and show that company that they made a colossal mistake in laying you off. Now, of course, as you process the stages of grief, which you should if you haven't done that yet, you'll probably get to the point where you're ready to dust yourself off, get back into the job market, and prove that that company made a mistake. And just like Rocky Balboa, I think there's a part of all of us that likes to root for the underdog. So I'm going to walk you through how I would approach bouncing back from my own layoff in order to show the world that I mean business and I'm better than ever. But before we get into that, if you're interested in learning how to reclaim control in your career and your job search, and this is especially important if you just got laid off, then you want to sign up for my free newsletter. And in it, I share concise, actionable tips on how to bounce back quicker than ever with better interview skills, how to write resumes, networking, and how to approach your career with more strategy. In other words, I teach you how to become the CEO of your career. Keep in mind, it's absolutely free. I will leave a link in the comments below if you're interested in signing up. Okay, so we all know the story. You show up to work one day, suddenly there's an invite in your inbox, and you're wondering what the heck it is. It's with your boss, and when you dial in, you realize that you're not alone and that there's an HR person waiting for you on the other end. And suddenly your stomach drops about 3 feet, and you probably realize what's coming next. And then they start the whole thing. They talk about how the business is reorging, and unfortunately, your position has been identified as one. And for a lot of us, we can be completely blindsided by this. So the shock of everything kind of takes a while to set in, and you're listening in disbelief as they give you the terms of your separation. And all the while you're thinking, why did you choose me and not that person over there or not that person over there? We've all had these experiences before. You are not alone, and inevitably you have a desire to try to prove them wrong, that they made a huge mistake in letting you go. Now, there is a component of ego associated with our careers, and we all have to accept that. Especially in a layoff, it can be bruised and bruised pretty deeply. So in order to get back up on your feet and brush yourself off, here's some of the things that I would specifically be doing. First thing I would be doing is trying to learn from the situation. And this might be particularly difficult if you're still pretty bitter, still pretty fresh, still pretty jaded, because that's pretty much a natural reaction. We put up a defensive wall and we don't want to consider what potentially went wrong. Now, in a lot of cases, nothing may have gone wrong. You may have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong job in the wrong company in the wrong industry. But inevitably, there's a root cause to what happened. It could have been a new senior leadership team that came on board and you didn't have a chance to build those new relationships. Or maybe that project team that you were working on got de-emphasized and your position was caught up in the restructure. But you might have to consider that you maybe took too much risk joining an experimental or brand new project that had never gone to market yet, because there is a likelihood that it could fail and they could restructure just like happened with you. Or maybe you joined a technical startup who didn't really even know what they wanted. They weren't properly funded. And you took the risk of taking the job anyway because it was exciting, it was new, it was fresh. There was the possibility of joining one of those unicorn companies that could really pay out in the end. And unfortunately, it didn't work out that way for you. And I think we need to be realistic that some people do end up on layoff lists if their metrics are trending below the rest of the group. If your numbers on that spreadsheet are lower than everybody else around you, then you can expect that your name got circled on the list. Now, it's not worth spending time stewing on what has already happened, but it is worth looking and diagnosing at what went wrong so that you can avoid it going forward. And this may be a great opportunity to assess whether or not the industry is stable, or maybe the job type that you're in isn't a great fit. But this is all part of the healing process after a layoff, and one that you shouldn't neglect. Try to identify the root cause of what happened. The second thing that I would do then is start to establish a clear strategy of what you want to do going forward. You should know where you want to head in your career, and especially after a layoff, it is a chance for you to reevaluate it with a relatively clean slate. You're going to have to go through the pain of looking for a new job and kind of starting over, but you want to do it with the highest degree of strength. And for me, you can't possibly have a strong career and a strong career path going forward if you don't have a clear destination in mind and you don't have a strategy in which to get there. Formulating a clear and concise strategy is absolutely critical at this stage because you don't want to choose another position that isn't a good fit for you, because one bad job tends to lead to another bad job, which tends to lead to a third bad job. And I've seen really strong careers get derailed by one poorly timed layoff. And I would strongly recommend that you go through a process of career mapping or career planning so that you can look at what skills you may be currently gapping on today. And that's the next thing I would be focusing on. Even before I started looking at writing resumes or looking for jobs or any of that stuff, I would be focusing on what skills do I currently need to get in my career so that when I go to market, I can be as strong a candidate as possible. Because let's face it, there's probably a lot of other people in similar situations to you that have all entered the market at the same time, especially in times where there's a lot of layoffs. And honestly, competition is one of the biggest challenges that you're going to face. There's a lot more people vying for a lot less jobs that are high quality, especially those coveted remote roles. So you want to make sure that your resume reads as strongly as possible. And in order to do that, you have to have the right stuff in your background. So I've been looking at ways to improve my resume, maybe find some training courses, maybe get certified in something that you're lacking. You may have to get a little creative here in order to get the right keywords, especially if you're unemployed. But now's the chance for you to do that. Let's face it, you probably have some time on your hands. Only after I've assessed and upgraded my skills to the best of my ability given my circumstance, then I will start to look at the tools of the trade that I need to develop further or build better. In other words, I'm going to start with the resume first. I'm going to make sure that I have a very clear and concise resume that is written, that is actually effective, that recruiters actually notice and can get you into the interview process. I hate to say this, but so many people come to me for career coaching and we look at their resume. They say, my resume is good. I don't need any help there. And I'll ask them, well, are you getting any phone calls back? And I'll say, well, my response rate's probably about 5%. I say, well, that's a resume problem if you're applying to jobs that you're reasonably qualified for, but you're continually getting rejected. And in almost every circumstance, they have a resume that has some critical flaws that don't present them in the most effective manner possible. So learning how to write a resume that actually gets the recruiter's attention, and then beyond the recruiter, the hiring manager as well, is so critically important. And there is an art to it. It's not just going out and getting a simple template and going off and filling out a bunch of stuff that you did in your career and then hoping for the best, because that's usually going to put you at a huge disadvantage. And now, of course, you can also update your cover letter. I have some mixed emotions about how effective those actually are, but some employers do demand them, and they probably can help move the needle in some cases. But I also want to make sure that I'm updating and getting my LinkedIn profile into shape as well. Because when we build the LinkedIn profile properly, we can set it up so that we're getting the maximum chance of recruiters coming and discovering us. And listen, it's a lot easier when a recruiter is coming and finding you than the other way around. And a good litmus test is to go onto your analytics, check out how many people are actually looking at your profile, and then what the job titles are on them. If they're recruiters, they're HR people, then it looks like you're doing something right. Your profile is actually working for you, especially if they're finding you for the right job titles. But having a great profile and then using the job search function on LinkedIn is only probably 20% of the battle here with networking. We don't want to neglect our in-person networking. I would check out the Chamber of Commerce, see if there's any job fairs going on. But insert yourself into the scene, especially the scene related to your career type or your industry. People should know who you are, especially if you're unemployed. That's the best possible way to getting hired. It's who you know. Of course, LinkedIn is the most powerful career networking tool on the planet. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about it, but there's simply no other place that you can connect with the right kind of people in the right situations, with the right industries, with the right companies than LinkedIn. So I would strongly suggest that you get over your aversion to it, or whatever you want to call it, and dive in deeply into LinkedIn, because that is the most powerful way to get it. The whole networking component, the in-person and the online networking. And the next tip that I'm going to share with you is something that I take very seriously. It's very near and dear to my heart, and something that I'm going to be covering more on this channel in the very near future. And that is building multiple income streams, because this is a core foundational strategy on how to deal with layoffs. Imagine having 2 or even 3 different ways to cover all of your expenses. Think about how much less stressful your life would be if your entire existence is completely reliant on a single source of income that's called a salary. Then you are at extreme risk if it gets ripped away from you like it does in a layoff. But if you have more than one way to cover your bills, suddenly you have a lot more power, you have a lot more options, and you don't have to accept the first crappy job that comes your way. And this gives you a lot better strength when you're approaching the job market, and you can be very selective at this point. And listen, oftentimes people end up taking jobs out of sheer panic, because inevitably what will happen is you'll accept a job that is 2 or 3 layers beneath where you should be, because you need to stop the bleeding. You need to pay the mortgage. You need to make sure that your car is not going to get repossessed. You got to put food on the table. And so now you're accepting offers that are 20, 30, 40% less than what you used to be making. And let's be real here. If the company even hires you, and a lot of times they'll think you're a flight risk because there's such a leveling mismatch that they won't even offer you the job, that if you do take that job, you probably are a flight risk. You're probably going to continue to look for new roles because you're compensated so much lower. The level is so off. And all that ends up doing is weakening your resume. You start to get into a vicious snowballing effect where one bad job leads to another bad job, leads to another bad job. And again, a perfectly good career can get ruined very easily if you're not careful. Again, we talked about the strategy. If you haven't started thinking about multiple streams of income, and you don't have to own a business or do some moonlighting side hustle in order to have a multiple stream of income, there's lots of different ways that you can do it. But if you don't have it, you are putting yourself at extreme risk, not only from your career, but your family is probably depending on you to be the breadwinner. And listen, you're eventually going to get back to work. That is not a question. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of being consistent. It's a matter of doing all the right things. The people who have the strategy, the people who have the better tools, the people who have the stronger networks, these are the people who will get back into the workplace faster, but everybody will eventually get there. And when it's your time, and it will be your time, announce it to the world. Go off onto LinkedIn and tell everybody about the great opportunity that you just landed. Who knows, maybe it's even a better opportunity than the one that you just got laid off from, and show them how much you've grown. Show your old boss and the people in your network who are looking from afar and saying, wow, it's kind of like a phoenix rising out of the ashes. And I felt like I probably did that myself. After I got laid off, I started this Life After Layoff channel. For me, it was a passion that I had wanted to do for years and years and years, and had been putting it off. And I took the opportunity of a layoff to then rise above and completely transform my life. But you can transform your life as well. And you may find that the layoff was actually a blessing in disguise and was one of the best things that ever happened to you. So if all this sounds like your fantasy, I implore you to go through each step of the process that I just laid out in this video. And if you need more help, go over to my website, lifeafterlayoff.com, and I can teach you how to reclaim control in your career, because you owe it to yourself. Anyway, I appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.